así la pose, que luego se nos olvida. Buenas a todos, chavales. Otro viernes más con el Star Citizen Live. En este caso, pues nos van a hablar de la interfaz de usuario, chavales. Es decir, del Star Map. Por favor, que nos hablen del Star Map. Queremos saber cosas del Star Map, ¿no? A ver un momentito, que tengo por aquí puesto. Ahí estamos, de acuerdo. Buenas, señor Reichel. Reggable, que no se te saludó, pero te saludo otra vez por si acaso. Que efectivamente ya es viernes, tío. Ya es viernes. Hoy he renovado el corte de pelo. Necesarísimo. Ese moicano ahí que se está cultivando. A medida que conseguimos el partner, el moicano se perfecciona, chavales. Va todo de la mano. Y bueno, faltan 4 minutillos. Faltan 4 minutillos, 3 minutillos, de hecho. Y la verdad es que, yo qué sé. A ver si nos dice Discolando algo más del live, porque estamos ansiosos, ¿no? Estamos ansiosos de verlo salir. La verdad. Creo que esto es una nueva etapa para el Star Citizen. Y para nosotros, los jugadores de Star Citizen. Es un antes y un después totalmente. Percorins. El más barato, tío, la Aurora. Aurora MR. El más barato, Ferconis, porque una vez tú adquieres el juego, pues ya puedes hacer a todo el contenido y además tienes tiempo de meterte en los entresijos de upgradear naves si te apetece aportar más pasta al proyecto. Pero Aurora, tío. La Aurora sin duda. O sea, tienes tiempo de meterle más pasta luego si quieres tener una nave superior, pero bueno, es que no... Ya te digo, o sea, si te pasas por alfilo.org, nosotros cuando salga el live le vamos a dar y bueno, pues probablemente vayamos a hacer multitripulación y demás, y ahí vas a poder aprender cosas y o sea, mientras haya un respeto, ya digo, siempre por los compañeros y mi curro aquí, todo el mundo bienvenido. Buena, malísima. Como salga algo
Hello, everybody.
Tiene que salir.
This is an audio test. This is the sound of my voice. Boy, what a good-looking voice. Hey, Simon, what does your voice look like? Nobody's asked you what your voice looks like? Oh, hold on. We can't. See? There we go. That's why we test. They couldn't hear you. You got to try it again. What does your voice look like?
About this, I guess my voice is kind of normal coloured, I would think. Average.
It's kind of
It's probably fine.
A sky blue.
Yeah, I like blue and green. Any nature-based colours, I'm happy with. So it's either of those. I'm good.
David Bone Gill, what does your voice look like?
Hello. Maybe I'll go for autumnal this year. I'm a good autumnal colours kind of person.
Nice.
I like that. That's good.
Autumnal. It's a word
Autumnal.
I don't get to use that word
sorry,
very much.
a bit like
no.
fall.
I was just thinking about it. I think you're right. It's just there's also an autumn voice is perfectly acceptable, but there's also a word that we don't use very often called autumnal. It just made me think of that. I think it only applies to pumpkin spice lattes. It's the only place I ever see it used. All right, you ready to start the show?
Yeah, good.
Ready as ever.
All right, we'll go to the title screen. Let's go to the title screen. Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Star Citizen Live Outer Space Interface, because I'm a sucker for the rhyming titles. I'm your host, Jared Huckabee. And if you've never seen Star Citizen Live before, well, it's where we take about.
Bueno, aquí está comentando lo típico, ¿no? Soy Jared Huckabee, vuestro host para este show. Y bueno, si no habéis visto un Star Citizen Live antes, pues a través de Spectrum toman preguntas, otras veces hacen otro tipo de shows, ¿no? Pero normalmente toman preguntas de la gente a través del Spectrum y también en directo, pues para hablar en directo con lo que es desarrolladores del juego, ¿no? Para meterse más en profundidad en aspectos del desarrollo o temas del juego.
Hello, nice to meet you, Jared. Again.
And we've got a principal UI programmer, Mr. David Bone Gill.
Hello, Jared. How you doing?
I'm doing well. Now, you've heard me say bone several times because throughout the hour, we're going to end up slipping and referring to David as Bone because that's his nickname. And every time we have David on a show, which is not often, but every time we have him, it lends to some confusion. So for all those people who aren't here at the beginning, like they're going to jump in 5 minutes, 10 minutes, or the people who jump in 30 minutes into the show, if they're like, what's Bone? What are they talking about? You all in chat, you all help us out. You all help us out here and tell people who the heck we're talking about here, so they don't think there's just this third person missing on the camera. Now, before we get started on this week's show, as we are wont to do, let's take a few minutes and find out who you are and what you do, because the way UI works and is developed in this project is perhaps maybe a little bit different. That comes from our building blocks thing. It democratizes the process, and we'll get into that. But just so folks understand the kind of scope of work and stuff, actually, David, why don't we start with you? What is your role in Star Citizen and its UI development?
Ooh, okay. Well, my role is I'm primarily a programmer, but I'm like I think people call it a systems architect, which is like a fancy name for developing systems. And I've been developing the system for the UI for our game. We had like the system that in place, but it wasn't really very Star Citizen-y.
Vale, lo que está comentando este señor es que David, ¿no? Que es mi tocayo, es un arquitecto de sistemas, que es una forma elegante de definir su trabajo, ¿no? Como comenta y tal, la verdad que sí. Que se dedica, pues eso, a armar sistemas de interfaz para que funcionen en lo que es en el juego.
Systems in the game and make it easier for the designers to make UI, make it easier for the programmers, like the gameplay programmers, to present their stuff so we can make UIs for them, things like that. And also bring in all these different like new rendering techniques as well, because what we had before was kind of what people would call a traditional UI.
Claro, al final esta persona es digamos, una persona que brinda herramientas de trabajo de alguna manera a lo que son los artistas o desarrolladores de campo, vamos a decir, con respecto a lo que es el juego de Star Citizen, en este caso, pues tratando de incluso ir implementando, modernizando las herramientas a los estándares modernos de la industria.
Problems along the way, a lot of them new problems that you don't really see in a lot of games, and some of them are just like big performance problems and big there's just a lot of stuff in our game, so like trying to make it so good tools so we can make things as quickly as possible. Well, iterate as quickly as possible, I think so.
Right. You said I made this. You used the past tense a few times, but yeah, these are still tasks that are ongoing. I mean,
absolutely, yes.
I think it'll.
Estoy haciendo ya una cosa muy importante que para aclarar. Las herramientas es un proceso que sigue estando. O sea, se siguen trabajando en herramientas para ir dándole. Star Citizen dice cuando sigue siendo un alfa, ¿no? De tenerlo en cuenta. Que hay muchas herramientas que todavía siguen en desarrollo, que al final, ¿esto para qué sirve? Bueno, pues las herramientas pues van a facilitar muchísimo el trabajo, acelerar muchísimo los procesos de trabajo, de tal manera de que Star Citizen, pues en algún momento será el introducir cosas nuevas a Star Citizen o el modificar aspectos del juego a nivel de interfaz, en este caso, pues será mucho más sencillo, más ágil, más rápido, más eficiente, ¿no? tanto para lo que es la persona que lo hace como para en cuestión de rendimiento para nosotros ejecutarlo en nuestro ordenador.
UI or bits of the UI. So we have to make sure that it feels like the same game essentially. So there's a certain amount of rules for how stuff should work associated with that, and also there's the visual side of things. So got to make sure that say what the active feature team is working on is similar to what UI feature team is working on, and so on across the company. So there's quite a lot of that. That's the main part of the job. I also help to run the UI feature team, so I do a little bit of team lead stuff there, just kind of doing the day-to-day, making sure people are happy and everything's planned out and that kind of thing. And very rarely, one thing I like to do is do a bit of hands-on. So I like to get in there and do a bit of kind of technical stuff, build some UI,
when you can.
make it work. But a lot of the time, it's talking to other people and organizing things and giving people feedback.
Now, you said something interesting, and we're going to jump into that with our next question here. Working with other teams, like the actor feature team, to make sure the things that they've created are in line with other things. Unlike, I'm not going to speak for every single game in development, but unlike many other games out there, the UI team does not build all of the UI. In Star Citizen, we have created a system that democratizes that process and puts the power in the hands of system designers on the actor feature team, system designers on the EUPU.
Claro, aquí está diciendo algo muy importante y es que el equipo de interfaz de usuario, el equipo que se encarga de desarrollar la interfaz de usuario no hace toda la interfaz de usuario de todo el juego, sino que ellos lo que hacen es proporcionar esa plataforma para que otros equipos puedan desenvolverse, como puede ser el Actual Feature Team u otros equipos. La persona que está arriba a la izquierda, que se me escapa el nombre, que no sé si era Ted, no me acuerdo bien, comenta de que es la persona precisamente, una de las personas encargadas de coordinar y este tipo de interacción entre diferentes equipos y además pues que de vez en cuando también se engrasa las manos, ¿no? con movidas técnicas cuando tiene tiempo.
So I'll start. There's plenty of things that Bone could say on this, but I think the important thing from my side is that we've rolled it out from something that the kind of the core UI team used to use, and we were kind of working out how to use it as well. It's got to a point now where it's good enough for the rest of the team to use. So we kind of rolled it out to game designers across the company, some of the artists, and that kind of thing. So it kind of makes our jobs easier, I suppose, because it's not just 6 people trying to get the UI done for the whole company. Now, those particular teams can take control and they can make their own kind of demos and functional versions of stuff. So that's a really big thing that it's brought to us. Bones, I'm sure Bone could go a lot into the technical things that have changed over the past year as well.
Over the past year, I think the major thing that we've been working on, like at the core tech level, would be adding 3D, which it's a big feature, and it's as soon as you jump from drawing some text and some images to, hey, I want to be able to draw models, I want to be able to draw characters, vehicles, and all these kind of things as part of the UI scene. Things get pretty complicated of that. So we've been.
Claro, está comentando algo que para muchos de nosotros puede parecer muy obvio, muy evidente, ¿no? Pero comenta de que una de las cosas en las que han estado trabajando estos últimos años ha sido en el tema de la interfaz en 3 dimensiones y lo comenta como algo que es un trabajo realmente gordo, que han estado bastante tiempo, ¿no? Que no es fácil hacerlo por lo que comenta y pues hay que tener en cuenta pues eso, pues formas de las naves, integración en las naves o texturas, materiales, que lo comenta como que es algo que es bastante trabajo, ¿no? Y refiriéndose a ello como tecnología núcleo, tecnología base, pues para lo que comentaban antes, ¿no? De que realmente pues al final ellos lo que están haciendo es crear esa plataforma para que los demás miembros del resto de equipos puedan divertirse, vamos a decirlo así, ¿no?
Has its own scene, its own camera, it has 3 lights, so there's just thousands and thousands of little objects we have to manage all the time. So that's what we've been doing over the past year. So as a core technology group, we developed that stuff ready for the gameplay teams to use. So maybe I'm hoping that we're in a space that they start using it, and then they'll develop their UIs, and hopefully the players will get to see that in a couple of releases time after that, because we're like right at the start of that change. So it now is into a state that the gameplay teams start to use it, and then they come back to me and say, hey, it's not quite working correctly yet. And then I fix a few things, and then
Pero está comentando que ellos, una vez desarrollan esa tech, pues tienen que pasarlo a los equipos de gameplay, de desarrollo de gameplay. Entonces, a partir de ahí, pues incluso pues, se han encontrado con que dice el equipo, bueno, pues tenemos fallos y tal, y tienen que corregirlo, tienen que revisarlo, pero espera que este tipo de resultados pues sean visibles por los jugadores en un par de parches más adelante, ¿no?
So if somebody wants a button, instead of having to build it from all the pieces, they can just drag a button into their scene and change the name on it. So we've added quite a few bits like that. So it doesn't make a massive difference to what people see at the end of the process, but for like less technical people, game designers and artists, it's a lot easier for them.
Claro, el hecho de poder cambiar la posición o el lugar de un botón, de que se pueda pulsar y que eso quede bien, comenta, puede que no sea algo importante desde el punto de vista del jugador, pero desde el punto de vista de una persona que no tiene, de un artista, ¿no? Que no tiene la experiencia técnica que puede requerir hacer eso, el facilitárselo con una herramienta, pues evidentemente avanza, es una mejoría muy grande.
You know, in the world of game developers, that all game developers are also master technicians. You know, they've all got degrees in computer science, or they all understand. You know, they all understand the inner workings of everything. And the reality is that many of these, you know, people, you know, artists or whatever, they come from very specialized fields, and so, you know, building a tool set.
Claro, está reforzando lo que están comentando, discolando, diciendo de que el hacer user friendly, ¿no? El hacer amigable lo que es las herramientas para los diseñadores de juego puedan implementar pues este tipo de cosas en juegos es importante, porque no todos los diseñadores de juego tienen todos los títulos del mundo mundial y son expertos en todas las materias, sino que más bien en los equipos de desarrollo del juego se tiende precisamente a una especialización. Una persona que está especializada en arte o otra persona que está especializada en props, pues no está especializada en precisamente esta tecnología núcleo de lo que es el cómo crear un sistema de interfaz, ¿no?
Of other teams, you know,
that's a
creating
bit
UI
unfair.
that just doesn't work.
Well, go on then, Bone.
Well, I think clean up is probably a bit overdoing it, but I definitely get a lot of calls during like the release phase of saying, hey, I've made all this and it's not working quite how I expect it to. Now, is that because they've implemented it wrong, or is it because maybe my stuff's wrong, or our, you know, the core tech is wrong? So trying to help them debug what's going on and find out what the problem is, I think that's grown, but that's a really good thing. I can only see that as like a really positive step, because we get lots and lots of people contributing now, and being a support role is a lot easier than what we used to do, which was having a really compressed role at the end of the release cycle, which is all the gameplay teams have finished their feature and just go, it just needs UI now. Can you just make the UI for it? And you'd have
It just
like,
needs UI now.
That was really tricky.
Claro, están comentando una cosa interesante, ¿no? De que es el cambio de flujo de trabajo, de mentalidad. La empresa de Star Citizen pues está evolucionando de una manera muy positiva, y una de las cosas que dice es que, bueno, estamos haciendo un sistema que sirva para todo lo que es el tema de interfaz, y que es mucho más liberador trabajar de esta manera para ellos, incluso de que consigan mucho más feedback del resto de equipos, pues están trabajando en un sistema que es unificado, por así decirlo. Y entonces, a la hora de corregir los errores y los fallos que se produzcan, es mucho más agradable el camino y es un paso hacia adelante, más que una manera más comprimida de trabajar en el sentido de que directamente pues saquen una mecánica nueva y te llamen y te digan, oye, hazme una interfaz para tal movida, ¿no? Entonces que como que esta forma de trabajar es más eficiente, ¿no?
We almost have a similar thing with the UI tool, where it's not
Yeah.
AI that's doing it, but we'll make it decide to do a particular thing, then we hand it over to people to actually use, and they come up with all these crazy ways of using it that we never expected. So they're usually doing really cool stuff, but sometimes I suppose there's two sides to it. Sometimes we'll get something that works really well, and then we'll look at the file that's been made to construct it, and it's like spaghetti. There's just connections everywhere. So we sometimes go in and kind of tidy that up a bit and let them know, here's another way you could do it that's going to be a bit more efficient, that kind of thing. And other times it's like, there is no better way to do this. So
Claro, dice que a la hora de entregar la herramienta a los diseñadores de juego, que a veces vienen con cosas sorprendentes de trabajar con esas herramientas y otras veces pues hay situaciones en las que hay un espagueti de movidas y que tratan de instruir en ese sentido también, de dar apoyo para decir, mira, se puede hacer de esta manera que es más eficiente y otras veces dice, pues, ostras, pues no lo podías haber hecho de mejor forma, ¿no? Que una vez sueltan la herramienta, pues está diciendo ahora Discolando, ¿no? Que el desarrollo no es construcción, es exploración, ¿no? Es exploración a lo largo de lo que es la creación del proyecto. Es una exploración constante y precisamente cuando entregan las herramientas, pues el uso expandido de estas herramientas por otras personas enriquece lo que es la forma de trabajar con esas herramientas, ¿no?
The question and answer period from the backers here in a minute. For those of you who are wondering why we spent this time, talking about building blocks and bringing everybody up to speed here, it's because I want to preface this before we get into some of these answers. The UI folks, the UI team at Star Citizen, because we have this building blocks, because we've democratized the process and allowed the system designers for all these various teams to create their core functionalities, a lot of the questions about core functionality don't actually apply to the UI team, whereas you otherwise might think they do. Like, can this button control all this stuff and stuff? That's actually something for the system designers and those individual teams that you're asking. So we did put the call out and grab some answers from some of the other teams. So we're not going to ignore all the very specific drill down questions, but I just want you to keep in mind that when we talk about some of these more granular details, these are actually the work of the EUPU feature team or the vehicle feature team and stuff like that. And
Claro, está comentando de que una cosa es el tema de la interfaz y otra cosa es cuál es el funcionamiento de... Cuando nos vamos al detalle, a mirar el detalle del funcionamiento de lo que es el resultado que nosotros percibimos de la interfaz, detrás de eso no solo está el equipo de interfaz, sino que hay muchos otros equipos que tienen sus propias características núcleo y que al final pues la interfaz es una expresión en muchos casos de ese trabajo que se realiza en otros equipos, ¿no? Es un medio para que el jugador pueda interactuar, ¿no? Pero no todo el peso de eso recae sobre el equipo de interfaz. Lo comenta porque a la hora de las preguntas y respuestas que va a haber ahora, pues que tengamos en cuenta ese detalle, ¿no?
radar, the star map, potentially some of the AR markers, and also the interior map. We think really that should be one thing, essentially. So like Chris Roberts has always had this idea that he wants to be able to start from the radar and zoom out from that, and you can see the star map, and you can zoom out and see the galactic view, essentially. So we've been writing it around that idea. So we've got this really massive design that ties all those systems together, which is pretty cool. We started writing code systems to support that. So we've got. I mean, one thing that's tricky with it, there's all this data from all over the game. So we got the planets and stuff. We've got the radar data. We got even things like missiles. We've got to somehow tie that together in a way that we can put into one place. So we spent quite a lot of time working on the tracking system for all that stuff. So that's all. It's all good now, and we're kind of at the stage where we want to start building the real thing. So I mean, the challenge is spending the time to fit all that stuff together. So that's something that we've been kind of ticking along in the background, but we're going to start ramping up on that very soon, I think. Couldn't give you a release date, but
we don't do
Claro, está comentando sobre el Star Map, que la visión que tiene Chris Roberts es que precisamente pues tú estés en el radar de tu nave y haciendo zoom hacia afuera, ¿no? O sea, haciéndolo más pequeño, pues zoom out, ¿no? Puedas llegar a ver incluso el sistema, el universo, ¿no? Que eso esté todo combinado, incluido pues lo que son fijado de objetivos, misiles, todo, ¿no? Entonces, que dice que el tema del fijado de objetivos y misiles como que están bastante contentos con eso, que tienen ya una muy buena base y que el tema del Star Map está diciendo ahora mismo Discolando que no es algo que puedan construir de forma separada, sino que realmente el objetivo es que el Star Map tenga representación real de todas las cosas que están sucediendo, ¿no?
Like the service beacons and stuff like that. It's got to be able to inherit all this data from those other systems. And while those other systems are still being worked on, are still being developed.
Claro, efectivamente está diciendo de que el objetivo del Star Map, del radar y de todo es que sea todo un conjunto, de que sea escalable en ese punto que estamos hablando y que además también es dependiente de otros sistemas que todavía se están trabajando en ellos. Entonces, no es algo que se vaya a hacer en plan de golpe y tal, sino que es algo que se tiene que ir haciendo de forma progresiva. Y comentan además el equipo de interfaz que tienen ya una muy buena base para poder empezar a trabajar en eso en serio, ¿no? En ese tipo de Star Map que todos queremos, ¿no?
That it has to inherit information from. Another follow-up question to the star map from the chat. Will the design of this new star map be similar to the ARC star map that folks have on the website right now? SCL Q&As aren't usually the visual shows. We don't usually have things to show. So I guess describe what should we be expecting? Paint us a picture in our heads, I guess.
Okay, so I think anyone who's seen the ARC star map will have a good idea of, I suppose, the general idea of where we want to take it, because we do all like that. It's I don't know, it's easy to interact with. It's quite clear. You can navigate between different pieces of it easily, a lot more easily than what's in game at the moment. So that's definitely an inspiration for us. So visually, it would be. I definitely want us to try and push it a bit further than that. So try and get a bit more of that sci-fi movie feel to it. And in terms of functionality, because it's kind of your window on the world, I think what we need to do as well is have a bit more of a sort of Google Maps, Apple Maps style navigation thing going on. So, for example, if you want to find a planet on the other side of the solar system, being able to search for it, maybe just quite easily navigate to it from this central interface. I think all that sort of stuff is going to make it feel nice. And so we're looking to.
Claro, están preguntándole de si el Star Map se va a parecer algo a lo que es el Arc Star Map, ese mapa donde vemos el mapa del universo de Star Citizen. Y comenta de que en realidad, pues definitivamente dice que es una inspiración para nosotros, pero quieren darle un toque mucho más ciencia ficción y además llevarlo un paso más allá. En cuanto a lo que es la búsqueda y cómo moverse, quieren hacer un estilo como sería el Google Maps y tal, de que tú busques un planeta, busques una luna y puedas acceder rápidamente a ella, pues escribiendo el nombre o tal y poder pues escoger una ruta.
Then UI team or sometimes lend support on the visual side as well. So like at the moment we're working on some refueling stuff. So EUPU have been working on that and they've made this system that works really well. They've done UI that is okay. It doesn't look great. But they're not a team full of like UI designers and artists. So what we'll do is pass some of the stuff over to our visual guys to kind of upgrade it and make it look cool and Star Citizen. And then the end product is really good. But yeah, in general, it's the code side that's involved with things like the mobile.
Claro, podríamos decir que esta gente se dedica a picar código y realmente pues luego el resultado visual que nosotros percibimos se lo pasan a otro equipo, al equipo de visuales, para poder tener un aspecto más refinado, más genial de lo que sería el Star Map.
Sure, I hope it doesn't give you PTSD, but we're waiting. It's like this feature is waiting on you.
Bueno, el Star Map o cualquier tipo de cosa, ¿no? Cualquier tipo de cosa que tenga con interfaz.
A common refrain back in those days because of what David just said earlier about how it's like you get to the end of the feature, then it's like, okay, slap a UI on it. It's like it was very clear that UI being downstream of everything was not the solution for a project as broad as Star Citizen.
Claro, dice que dices que una de las cosas que estaba sucediendo es que a la hora de sacar una característica aparecía el refrán eterno de se está esperando por la interfaz para que acabe, y definitivamente eso no era una forma buena de trabajar, porque estaba en todas las cosas estaba recayendo el peso al final en lo que es el trabajar esa interfaz para esa mecánica concreta. Y el camino escogido pues ahora mismo es diferente, ¿no? El hacer realmente una herramienta fácil de usar por el resto de equipos para no tener esa dependencia, precisamente.
Oh, was it this sort of point of that when everyone was waiting for UI? And this is why Chris correctly sort of pivoted it, the team at that point. Says like this isn't going to work. We can't develop because we want to grow how many features we're going to develop, and that's just unless we just magic out of thin air another 20 UI guys, it's just not going to grow. It just turns into this great big bottleneck. So that is why around 2017, I think it was, we did change the mechanism that we wanted to develop the UI and go wide and like spread it across a lot.
Claro, dice que Chris Roberts esto lo vio claro, de que no podía estar el equipo pivotando entre diferentes mecánicas, sobre todo por la cantidad de mecánicas que se van a incluir, y que a partir de 2017 fue cuando empezaron a cambiar esa mentalidad y trabajar en otro tipo de cosa, ¿no? En un sistema que fuese, pues eso, una herramienta para todos, ¿no?
If you had 10 features and each of them have a few UI bugs in, then and they all have to be done by one UI team, it becomes a real bottleneck. So it was really good to go wide across the company, and each of those guys then get the ownership of their particular feature from start to finish, and not just go, it's done, just needs UI. We're just waiting on the UI guys. It's like, you are the UI guys now, right?
Right.
You know, bar some
we deputized
nice fancy graphics and animations from the art design departments.
We deputized a bunch of people on a bunch of different teams throughout the company. Congratulations. From the live chat here, moving on to another topic that's close to a lot of people's performance heart. Where was it? Mock Driver 22 says, how far are we from declaring Star Citizen completely flash free?
7.
We have 7 to go, or are we 7 along? How does that work? What scale are you using, Bone?
Oh, I'm not giving you the scale. I'm just giving you a number. Quite far, I'd say. I don't want to. I can't give an accurate number. We're definitely past halfway.
We definitely got the process down. Like, we know exactly how we're going to do it, and we've got designs for a lot of the things that we want to change over, but a lot of it is balancing new features, I suppose, with going back to the old stuff and kind of porting it over. Because one thing that we like to do, and I think Chris Roberts likes to do this as well, is when we touch an old feature, we don't want to just take what was there and just put it in exactly the same. We'll
Claro, están haciendo la pregunta a través del chat en directo de cuándo Star Citizen va a estar libre de Flash. El Flash, bueno, es lo que al final hace que las pantallas vayan como el ojete, porque es una forma limitada de presentar la interfaz, y entonces de ahí es el surgimiento, el building blocks, y para poder sustituir todos esos procesos. Entonces, le están haciendo la pregunta de cuánto vamos a tardar en tener Star Citizen ya modernizado, ¿no? a las nuevas tecnologías de building blocks y demás. Y comenta que, bueno, que realmente el tema está en que tenemos el proceso, tenemos la manera, sabemos cómo queremos hacerlo, pero también está el hecho de que Chris Roberts no quiere que simplemente esas antiguas características que se pusieron en su momento se rescaten y se planten en la forma nueva y ya está, sino que quiere que haya una modernización en serio, un rework, ¿no? En definitiva, o sea que entonces eso pues también lleva su tiempo, pero están haciéndolo ahora mismo, ¿no?
Maintain a lot easier. Maintaining the old stuff has become quite difficult now. Like the knowledge base is reducing of people that want to work on this stuff.
Yeah, and also Flash isn't really supported anymore by Adobe, so the longer we go from, I don't know, the further we get through time, the harder it is to fix the flash stuff. So we definitely want to.
Claro, aparte que dice de que el resolver problemas con la escala y la dirección que está tomando el juego en Flash, que es cada vez más incordio, ¿no? Porque cada vez más complicado. Y a medida que avanza el tiempo, pues peor. Entonces, al final, el paso a este nuevo sistema, pues facilitará mucho ese tipo de cosas, ¿no? De gestión, de administración Entonces, que, bueno, pues estamos en camino, ¿no? De deshacernos de esa antigua tecnología de Flash.
Our biggest Flash El Guapo, for those who have seen Three Amigos. What progress can you give us on the Moby-Glass rework?
So, at the moment, I mean, we've been focusing mainly on other things, so star map or the design and so on, and the back end of the star map has been taking a lot of the focus, aside from just little bits and pieces of features here and there. We're starting to ramp up a little bit on the Moby-Glass now, so we're looking into some visual prototyping work. What Chris Roberts wants to see, he wants to know, taking the new tech that we've got with all this 3D stuff and so on, what can we do to make the Moby-Glass feel cool but still be usable? So,
claro, está comentando cuándo vamos a ver el cambio en el Moby-Glass. Entonces, una de las cosas que están diciendo ahora mismo que es muy importante es que están haciendo un foco tremendo en el Star Map, sobre todo. Y aparte de eso, pues están lanzando también lo que es el tema de trabajar en el Moby-Glass en general. Y una de las preguntas que ha hecho Chris Roberts es decir, bueno, con la tecnología que tenemos ahora, ¿cómo podemos hacer que el Moby-Glass se vea genial, pero al mismo tiempo no pierda funcionalidad, o sea, tenga utilidad? Y ese es el camino, ¿no? que están siguiendo.
We know how it looks, how it works in 3D and so on. Then in theory, it's just a case of porting all the old apps across. So, like take the mission manager and update that visually and so on. So, right. I think it's one of those things that once we've got over the initial hurdles, it'll start to speed up. But I'm not giving you any dates.
No, we don't do dates here. This is a good time to reiterate something you dropped kind of casually early on. We don't just want to do conversions of these things from Flash to, building blocks and what it's.
Claro, esto es muy importante que está diciendo Discolando. No simplemente queremos hacer conversiones de Flash a lo que tengamos nuevo, sino que realmente queremos hacer algo que parta el bacalao, en resumidas. Y lo van a hacer. Sabemos que lo van a hacer, chicos.
Exact same thing. Why not take 9 weeks and actually redesign it? Make it better, improve upon it. Look at some of these features that backers have been asking for so long. Some of these features that we've been asking for so long, and take that effort to redo it and make it better at the time. So it does mean it takes a little bit longer than just converting it over, but ultimately it's worth it in the end, or we hope it will be.
Claro, efectivamente, el no simplemente reconvertir el Flash a building blocks y hacer realmente cosas originales con la nueva tecnología, aprovechándola en serio, efectivamente va a llevar más tiempo hacer las cosas, pero comentáis cuando esto va a merecer la pena, ¿no?
That's a good question. I think a few people have mentioned having games on there, so we don't have it in the plans at the moment, but it would be a cool idea. I'm not against doing that one day. There are plenty of other things to do in the game, I would say. Like plenty of other parts of game to get right before we consider mini games on the Moby-Glass.
Legal's actually in the other room. Toast! Does somebody own Snake? He's not responding. I'll check in with him and see what we can see if it's even legally allowed. Let's move on to some other features. One of the most requested things, it's been popping up in chat a couple. Question. Did you hear him? He just said, "It's a complicated question." He just yelled. You thought it was a gag. He was really there.
I thought it was. Yeah, that's usually my answer to any question that Simon gives me. It's like, "Can we do this?" And I just go, "It's complicated."
We'll just call it Caterpillar. We'll be all right. All right. So, night vision. Oh, cat alert. Hold on.
Hi. Sorry.
Hi, cat. Okay. We took our cat moment. Night vision. Night vision is a big one. Obviously, in space, it's always some version of night, I suppose. But as planets become a bigger feature of Star Citizen, as more gameplay moves down to them, the ability to see where you're going and not crash into a mountain becomes super important. We recently revamped ping and gave it this brand new shader that has this really cool and kind of draws everything like this. Have there been any discussions, any thoughts about implementing some version of night vision beyond just forcing people to put the ping on auto fire and just constantly
I don't know, to be honest. I
going
mean,
to see where they're going?
it's definitely
Good
something
idea.
that we need to improve in some way, but there's not really been any discussions on the UI side for what we can change there. I think it's probably more the kind of thing that the vehicle team and the active feature team would look into, to be honest, because once you can let people see in the dark, it's obviously got a load of gameplay implications. Like, people can.
Está comentando sobre la visión nocturna, de si vamos a tener alguna manera, aparte de estar haciendo pings constantes de radar para ver la posición, actualizar la posición. Dice que esto es algo más del equipo de Action Feature Team o de equipo de vehículos, pero no me sorprendería que ahora mismo estuviesen pensando en ese tema, dice, ¿no? En los otros equipos.
One of the it was actually a Halloween last year when we first showed off the Aegis manufacturer specific style guide for the ship HUDs, and since then we haven't seen a lot of forward facing information about it. What can you tell us about maybe not just the Aegis one, but any manufacturer based ship HUDs? How's that going?
So we've kind of, one thing we decided to do was do a little bit of a halfway house, because initially we got this cool thing that we've been building. I mean, we've been trying to get it really good for Squadron 42, so that was the initial focus for the Aegis HUD, and we felt that the amount of improvements that were going on there, the PU was missing out. So we've done this kind of intermediate version at the moment, which is what you can see. I think that's since the previous release. It doesn't look final. It's not intended to look final. It looks kind of cool, but it's not.
Nos está comentando sobre la interfaz que tenemos actualmente en las naves, que eso está pensado para X, y que en Escuadrón 42 comenta que está avanzado, pero han tratado de sacar una versión intermedia, que es la que podemos disfrutar ahora en el universo persistente, pero no es para nada la versión final que vamos a obtener.
Get that 100% how we want it. So all the features on there. So we have missile mode how we want it, bombs how we want it, all the different lock-ons and that kind of thing. And we're getting pretty close now, I think. But Chris Roberts basically wants to wait till that's just right, and then we're going to decide how we're going to roll that out to the rest of the game. While we've been developing that, it's not so difficult for us to.
Claro, lo que está diciendo es que ahora mismo tienen mandangueta preparada y calentita, pero están esperando a terminarla del todo, lo que es el cambiar pues todas las interfaces de las naves. Vamos a flipar, chavales, seguramente. Y Chris Roberts les ha dicho que cuando tengan el asunto terminado del todo, que entonces es cuando van a pensar cómo irlo sacando al universo persistente.
One thing we've started to do is, it's not the ship HUDs, but we started to roll out some manufacturer styles for the other screens in the ships.
Right.
So for Crusader ships, for example, I think in 315, you'll see on some of those we've got some new door panels, and we've got a style that we can apply to the elevators and so on. So that work is starting to.
Claro, está diciendo de que hay algunos estilos de las puertas, que hemos visto cómo ha cambiado la botonera, y que dice, bueno, pues podemos ver en las naves de Crusader, la 3.15, ese tipo de botoneras nuevas que hemos hecho para el estilo de Crusader.
I had to ask the
That's a
vehicle guys
VET
this,
question, really.
What did they say? Hang on. Where is that?
David, what's the cat's name?
That one's called Ronnie. That's one that has been confused by the clock time changes,
Right.
and she thinks it's an hour later than it is. So it's definitely tea time now, according to her.
All right, I found the QT waypoint stuff. So I spoke to John Crew, and he said that VET, the they do have plans for Quantum in future that it might not involve custom Qt waypoints, but it should give the same end result. So they're prototyping some ideas at the moment, but there's not a lot more they can tell right now.
Okay. Will the targeting UI get smarter than just red and white targets, such as color codes for team members, org members, faction members, etc.? This would really help during something like Ninetales.
Yeah, that's something that we're looking into right now. We have had feedback of expanding that system, because obviously just having, good, bad, and in between is quite, simplistic. So we've been looking at potentially adding some extra colors in there, some extra icons and so on, so you can, split out a lot more information from that. So we've been.
El tema de los colores se va a mantener tan simple o se va a hacer más inteligente en el sentido de la identificación de que no solo esté el color azul y el color rojo, ¿no? que solo sea bicolor, porque bueno, hay en otras naves que es verde y rojo. Si van a meter más colores. Dice que están trabajando en iconografía o otras cosas que provean. Están trabajando en maneras de aportar más información por el tema de miembros de party y demás historias.
Ship from saving Mfd status, such as which screens I choose to place on each MFD per ship. I'm going to guess that's probably just waiting for the new MFD system to be finished, right?
Yeah, this is more a matter of priority. So there's no technical blockers. Once it's possible right now, it's just not. You wouldn't write it with the current system, because we would want to. It would just be like wasted work. So we're in the process of upgrading the way that the UI works on MFDs, and part of that upgrade will include much better customization, and the much better customization.
Están comentando sobre las pantallas multifunción de las naves, y comenta de por qué no, cuándo vamos a ver el que se puedan guardar las configuraciones que hagamos. Diría que ahora mismo no hay ningún problema en hacerlo, pero sería trabajo desperdiciado. Pues están trabajando en actualizar la forma en la que trabajamos con esas pantallas y las pantallas en sí mismas. Y a partir de ahí no solo podremos guardar las cosas, sino que también se nos ofrecerá una personalización mayor de la nave.
Can we please have the old landing HUD back?
Yes.
Yes.
At some point. Yeah. So we have got plans to bring this back at some point. Yeah. It ties in a little bit with what we want to do with the radar, because you've got that spherical radar thing at the bottom. So some of the functionality relates to that. So it's part of that design to a degree, and it's definitely planned.
Okay. This is a big one for a lot. Obviously, Star Citizens are maybe not the normal batch. They're not all running 16 by 9, 1920 by 1080 screens by any means. Are there any plans to improve the UI so it better fits non-standard aspect ratios, like ultra wide screens? Yeah, I can see Bone. How you doing?
So what do you think about this, Bone?
Yes. So there's a one-word answer to this, which is yes, and then I could go all night about what we're doing to improve this.
Give us the 10-cent version.
Right. So aspect ratios are the thing that gives most UI designers, UI engineers, like the absolute fear. It's just the bane of our lives. But
está diciendo de las posibilidades de que se escale la interfaz a resoluciones no estándares, es decir, monitores como el que yo tengo. Y dice que esto, bueno, pues que el que la interfaz se adapte a diferentes resoluciones, que es una de las cosas más dolorosas para ingenieros y desarrolladores de interfaz. Pero sí, la respuesta es sí, se va a adaptar, ¿no? Va a haber... va a ser responsivo, se podría decir.
Jiggles around and it aligns itself properly, all being well if it's designed correctly. So it's all flexible like that. So the system is designed to be flexible. The coordinate system can change with the aspect ratios. So, you don't see stretch things and things like that. So that, like at a core level, yes, it's inbuilt, but then there's a design level that all the assets have to be designed in a way that can be flexible. So that's pretty tricky because you have to make lots of choices about, well, if it gets all squished up, do all these things go along the bottom, or do they get clipped off at the end, or do they shrink down, and all these kind of decisions that have to be made for each individual design. And then we've got individual like responses for things. So things like the front end, we've just pretty much gone with a 16:9 aspect ratio, and we just black bar the wider screens and or black bar the top and bottom if you're on a squarer screen. And that's it's a bit of a cop out for that screen, but it's nice because you can design a nice looking 16:9 layout for the whole front end. Where it gets a bit more tricky is things like the lens and visor, because that's obviously a lot more emergent, and then we still have to make a lot of decisions about this where I mean, the tech supports this, but it's just about making design decisions. Let's say you've got like different icons in the top left and top right hand corner. If you have 3 monitors, do you want those into the top left and right corners of those 3 monitors? Because that's not really in your eye line. You're going, oh, where's my map, or how many bullets do I have, or whatever it is. And you sort of, having 3 monitors is a bit more about having a lot of peripheral vision. It's not about like moving all the way out, or the UI all the way out. So there's a lot of design decisions that go along the lines of that. So yes, we're working on that also. And finally, one of the bigger problems one of the bigger challenges, of Star Citizen is it's diegetic. So that means like all this UI is actually in-world on physical objects. So we've got maybe a 16:9 panel, or even the mobiGlass is actually a 16:9 panel that you're holding in front of you like this. So that comes with challenges of saying, well, if I've got a very square monitor and I'm trying to look at this wider aspect ratio screen, where do you position your camera? I mean, there's only so far you can move your arm back, your head back, right, to try and see this oblong thing in a square.
Claro, está comentando de que, bueno, a la hora de colocar la interfaz, efectivamente, si nosotros tenemos 3 monitores, pues no queremos tampoco ver el mapa a tomar por culo, la munición a tomar por saco, y que son muchas decisiones que se tienen que tomar en consideración, como por ejemplo el hecho de mirar un mobiGlass en una pantalla más alta, o sea, más ancha, por lo que es la posición de la cámara, de cómo queremos que se vea el mobiGlass cuando lo tenemos en el brazo, ¿no? Y también pues el tema de visores de las armas, para que no rompa esa inmersión de una mirilla de francotirador, por ejemplo.
A physical piece of geometry, a piece of glass.
Entonces, una de las soluciones que están implementando, bueno, pues es lo que veis ahora mismo aquí, que veis que esta serie se está metiendo en 16 novenos, bueno, pues poner esas barras, digamos, para lo que es la interfaz. Y que evidentemente nosotros no notemos eso, ¿no? Pero para tener la interfaz centrada, ¿no? Y luego pues otras consideraciones de cómo colocar las cosas, de si a la hora de si lo ensanchamos, lo estrechamos o lo dejamos así limitado, o dónde posicionamos las cosas una vez esté más amplio. También vigilar el hecho de que precisamente prevenir que las cosas no se estrechen, no se alarguen, no se deformen. También tener en consideración no solo lo que es la interfaz con que respecta a nosotros, el jugador, sino también a la interfaz que puedan tener objetos dentro del propio juego, ¿no? O puede ser una pantalla de una subterminal, ¿no?
At all. Just put that out there. Just
Raises a ticket with that.
Yeah, we'll put it on the backlog.
Will we at some point be able to change the color of our HUDs? A light blue HUD over a snowy white planet and moon can be kind of hard to make out.
There's kind of 2 bits to this, I suppose. There's the legibility thing, like how easy is it to read, and then there's the customization thing. So in terms of legibility, we're always looking into better ways to do that. So we have a thing at the moment where it automatically makes the screen a bit brighter and increases the drop shadow on bright backgrounds. So that's a little step in the right direction. But we're always looking at ways we can improve that. So ideally, we want to get to a point where players wouldn't need to change the colors to be able to see the stuff. I think we're getting there. And then in terms of customization, the direction at the moment is we want to kind of make each manufacturer feel unique. So especially starting with the ships, we want people to be able to say, okay, my Drake ship looks like this with these particular colors, and my RSI ship looks this way. So we're definitely heading more towards that direction at the moment. Technology-wise, it would be possible for us to allow things to be customized, but I think that's something that we'd look at after we've got the vision.
Claro, está comentando del hecho de poder cambiar los colores de la interfaz o tal, pues porque a la hora de enfrentarnos a lunas muy blancas o tal, pues sí que es muy, muy difícil de verlo. Lo estáis viendo, ¿no? Cuando llego a gameplay. Están comentando de que para eso están implementando soluciones como incrementar el brillo y lo que es las sombras de la interfaz cuando estemos aproximando a una zona muy brillante y dice que bueno, que idealmente lo suyo es que los jugadores no tengan que cambiar de color para poder para ser legible, para que la interfaz sea legible, ¿no? Que están trabajando en maneras y que van por buen camino en conseguir ese resultado de que finalmente pues no se blanquee, ¿no? la interfaz cuando estamos viendo un objeto brillante. Con respecto a los colores y la personalización, están comentando de que técnicamente sería posible, pero que primero, antes de meterse en ese tipo de terrenos, quieren definir bien lo que serían las interfaces propias de cada fabricante. Por ejemplo, si tú te montas una nave de Drake Interplanetary, que veas pues lo que sería los colores, todo eso te transmita de que digas que es una nave de Drake, ¿no? Y que luego pues ya, una vez tengan eso bien definido en todas las marcas, pues ya plantearse la alternativa de quizás si lo personalicen o no, ¿no? Si se pueda personalizar o no por parte del usuario.
Snow, and then you suddenly fly into space, and then it doesn't look good. It's not really a solution. You have to keep configuring your colors to be able to read the UI. Really, the UI should be adapting to the environment properly, and hopefully we'll solve that, or at least get it dialed in a lot better.
I wonder if maybe it's. I mean, you can look. I think how to say this. I wonder if maybe even just a single button light dark mode toggle might just help folks, if it's just, put it in their control, like, it's light mode when they're flying everywhere else, and then when they happen to be facing the sun, or they happen, or they go down to the surface of Microtech, they can hit one button and just switch it to a night mode, which is a darker, theme. So I wonder if something like that might just resolve a lot of these issues in the meantime. But
yeah,
we've definitely talked about it for visually impaired.
Claro, está descolando diciendo de que quizás el poner un botón en el que los propios usuarios puedan activarlo para que se ponga en modo oscuro o modo claro, si estamos enfrentándonos a la luz del sol, ayudaría mucho a los usuarios. La verdad que sí, ya ayudaría que te cagas. Por lo menos de momento, dice, ¿no? Dice, hemos tenido discusión sobre este tema y tal. Y claro, la verdad es que sería la hostia que les pusiera.
Let's see, we've only got a couple minutes left. Let's see. One of the big features coming along in Alpha 3.16 is refueling. We're going to talk about refueling on ISC in a couple weeks, but as far as the UI, the interface, and stuff like that, what's your guys' involvement been in refueling up to this point?
Okay, well, refueling is a good one, actually. It's going really well. So when we started out, we began with a game. There was a game design doc that EUPU made, which was pretty cool. And then initially I had some conversations with those guys. We just roughed out some really basic ideas for the UI. So like I would just draw some boxes and put text on. So they had an idea of a very vague direction where I would take it. And then we kind of left it with them for a bit. And they've been implementing the actual system. And then using the building block stuff, they've put in this kind of placeholder UI. So it's all working, it's good. It just looks a bit rough around the edges. And then I think I mentioned it before, we've now kind of, we haven't taken it off them. We're working really closely with them to kind of take that and make it good. So process says we've got one of the guys is kind of a mixture between a graphic designer and a UI designer. So he's taken those initial screens and rejigged the layout a little bit and resized things, and also applied this nice color scheme and little graphical elements on there. So he's going to make these visual versions that are 2D.
Están preguntando sobre refinerías, sobre cuál es su proceso, o sea, qué han estado haciendo, si han estado involucrados en ella. Dice que sí, que de hecho que tienen una persona que es una persona que tiene conocimientos tanto de interfaz como de diseño y que ha hecho pues una especie de vista placeholder, ¿no? Y que tiene buena pinta y que va por buen camino, ¿no?
First look at Refueling in a couple weeks, sometime after IAE. And when we do show it, remember, like all things, it'll still be work in progress when you see it. Just important to remember that everything you see on ISC is work in progress. We put it down in the corner, but sometimes folks still like, why does it look like that? It's work in progress. Just look at the bombs. Remember how the bombs looked in ISC and like, oh, the bombs are a little overwhelming. And then you get into PTU and it's like, oh, wow. And you can see them from miles away. It's like, work in progress. We waited to the last show of the season. We waited as long as we could to get those.
Bueno, está comentando que el tema de la refinería lo vamos a ver en un par de semanas después del ISC, pero que va a ser trabajo en proceso y que todo lo que vemos en el ISC, que recordemos que es trabajo en progreso.
Chat. Here's another big one. Will in-game chat get an overhaul for display that will allow us to display multiple chat tabs with different colors, maybe all in the same feed? Chat customization.
Yeah, it's a good question. Chat is one of those things that we need to port over at some point soon. We've not really looked into what we want to change design-wise. I'm sure there'll be things like that we want to sort of polish up. But yeah, it's on our to-do list basically. So when we get to it, we'll check out what's there. We'll see what the competition are doing. Like there's a lot of other games out there that do a good job of chat, and we'll work out, what actually we want to put into it, and then.
Con respecto a la personalización del chat, dirán que bueno, que cuando nos pongamos a ello, que no están ahora todavía, pero definitivamente se tendrán que poner pronto, miraremos a la competencia, otros juegos de la competencia que han hecho un buen trabajo seguro y tratar de importar algunas ideas.
Another big question that comes up quite often. This is probably something along with like the star map work. Overall, what's involved in the creation of a coordinate system? Obviously, we have service beacons and stuff now, but it can be very difficult to determine where you are on a planet or in space and easily tell other people where you are. It's like this. What's involved in that kind of work? Is this something that we're ever going to have? Is this something that we can't have? Is this something that's in progress? What can you tell us?
I guess the way that games are made in 3D graphics as well, you generally have this like XYZ coordinate system, which is fine. Like if you want to see where this pen is in my room, I can say it's like 3 across and 2 up, whatever, which is fine. But then when you're in space, actually, imagine you're on a moon that's rotating, that's orbiting around a planet, which is orbiting around the sun. So those XYZ coordinates aren't going to work. So what we think we need to do is have like a system that relates to what you are on. So if I'm on that moon, I want to know, what's my angle relative to the center of the moon and how far out am I from that? So we'd probably go with something along those lines. In terms of putting it into the game, it's going to tie in quite closely with the new star map and radar. So we definitely do want to have that in there when we release a new version of those. So minimum will display where you are, so people can say, oh, I'm at this relative to Stanton system, for example. What we would like to do ideally is have some way of sharing those details. So maybe you can right click and send the location to one of your friends or that kind of thing. We still need to work out the details on that, but we definitely want to improve that whole area overall.
Gotcha, cool. Folks, you've done it. Your hour is done. Did it go by faster than I said it would?
It was pretty quick.
Yeah.
There's always like, oh, how are we going to fill up a whole hour? And then at the end, they're like, oh, that went by really fast. Thank you guys for taking the time to show up on the show this week. We don't get to have you on very often simply because the UI team is probably the one team in the entire company that touches every single aspect of Star Citizen's development. There is no aspect of Star Citizen that doesn't involve UI in one way, shape, or form. So these folks usually have their hands pretty full. So thank you for taking the time to join us here at the end of this week. That's it for Star Citizen Live Outer Space Interface. Come back next week. Next week on ISC, we have a show entirely dedicated to the future of space combat with the vehicle experience team. They got a whole nice little presentation about the current work, the work of their immediate future, and then some look at some long-term stuff. It's a great lead-in before IAE starts the next week before. And then next Friday when we come back here, we're going to have a super rare guest. Well, you'll have to tune in to find out. It's somebody who's made a lot of spaceships for us. It's somebody who's made more spaceships than anybody in the history of our game. It's Mr. Gavin Rothery, concept artist extraordinaire and film director and all kinds of stuff. So we're going to have him on the show and talk a bit about his career and life and work on Star Citizen. So check that out next week. For Star Citizen Live, I'm Jared. That was Simon. That was David Bone Gill. I think we made it through without calling you Bone a bunch of times. Take care, everybody. We'll see you next week.
Cheers.
Bye.
See, I told you that'd be easy.
It's easy when you know what you're talking about.
Ahora os digo de qué están hablando. Bien, nos comentan de que, bueno, estaban trabajando en maneras de referente al posicionamiento que los jugadores tienen en un astro o en el universo, de hacer referencia a ese astro, al ángulo y tal, y mirar, investigando posibilidades de compartir esa ubicación con amigos. Estaban trabajando en eso. Cosa que me sorprende porque, bueno, en un principio se había dicho que no se iban a poder compartir ese tipo de coordenadas exactas. Bueno, ya veremos cómo evoluciona esto, ¿no? Luego el tema también de que para la semana que viene se viene el ISC y nos van a hablar del futuro del combate en Star Citizen. Dice que van a hacer una mini presentación super tocha y que vamos a ver pues cosas interesantes, o sea que hay que estar ahí con el diente largo. Y también el viernes de la semana que viene parece que se viene un día muy interesante porque va a estar Gavin Rothery, que ha dicho que es la persona que probablemente ha diseñado más naves para Star Citizen. Ganitas de ver eso. Ganitas de ver eso, la verdad. Ojalá hablen del physical damage. Ojalá. Bueno, abre un momentito que ya sabéis que mientras estoy aquí no puedo... buenas Faircoins, J-Cross, Bárbara, VR Trooper, Ferfer también, What the fuck. Buenas Faibo, buenas Astur, buenas Chuppi, Zorro también por ahí. Malísima Monkey, bueno, el que ya al principio. El señor Chinarro también. Javicho también por ahí. A ver, ¿qué nos ha pasado por ahí malísima? También Rotary, pues eso. Qué basto el fulano. Ganitas de ver esto. Ganitas de ver esto. La Terrapin, qué pasada, ¿no? La Terrapin, qué pasada. Y el Saber, y la Kraken, y la Perseus, y Dios, la Ares. En fin. Bueno, vamos a ir para aquí. Ahí para el guild. Ahí estamos. Listo. Al final son diseñadores que tienen varias cosas, no solo están